Hello, this is Carmack Valley here. I'm fucking hungry. I want to order pizza so bad, but whatever. Recently, I think it was in the McDonald's video about this McDonald's CEO. I talked about a little bit, I talked a lot about how psychopathy and narcissism is a big thing in academia. And it's such a big thing that the majority of people can't even estimate it or can't even imagine it. Simply because in the free market, like not in the free market, but in economical institutions, in companies, in every other kind of like workplace which has nothing to do with academia, HR is basically modernized to really control the behavior of toxic managers, etc., etc. It doesn't always work, of course, but in modern companies, it's more like I would say, a kind of backstabbing culture with modern work and a social company and stuff like that. And so, but apart from that, the amount of toxicity of people being in higher positions tends to be a lot lower than the amount of toxicity in academic superior positions like professors, etc., etc. With regards to the scandalous behavior that came from that came out when the Max Planck Institute was being exposed in a documentary or some kind of TV report with people like scientific workers reporting how badly they got mistreated by leading professors and basically their bosses. And so I would say, based on the things I thought about, I philosophized about before making this video, and I think there is quite a large difference on the amount of such toxicity in leading positions based on the university subject you choose to go. Like, if you really want to become a researcher, you might want to consider the subject you want to really research on. Of course, the rule of thumb is, if you're really fucking fascinated by it, do it. I'm also I'm also kind of fascinated by psychology, but as soon as I started studying psychology, the first semester everything went quite fine, so it was quite okay. The second semester, I would say, went quite a bit rocky, but okay as well. And then the third semester hit when I realized this is a bunch of bullshit. I'm studying for 3 years, and after like the second or third semester, I have to write more essays than I have to write exams. I have to go out and do all these experiments and study designs myself. Like, do I look like a motherfucker in a white lab coat? Do I look like some kind of, I don't know, Bill Nye the Science Guy or whatever the fuck? I just want to study psychology because I found it interesting. I don't want to, like, create my own studies and bring my own knowledge to it. I'm not that obsessed with psychology. And that realization made me drop out and switch back to computer science and mathematics, because even though it's way harder than studying psychology, it's way less boring and way less annoying than comparing it to working with fucking SPSS all day. And so what did I want to talk about? Yes. And there is a point in like studying psychology and studying medicine or whatever that leads to what I believe is the reason for this whole controversy about really toxic professors and really toxic people in superior positions. And I would say the amount of randomness in the scientific findings of a subject is positively proportional to the amount of toxicity and the amount of anger and like the amount of psychopaths, narcissists, etc. in these scientific disciplines. Now the reason for that is I talked to my best friend from childhood a couple of months ago, and he's a studied chemist, so he has a Master of Science in Chemistry, etc. Of course, I won't say his name, and I won't say what he wrote his master thesis about, because I want to protect him at this point. But I want to make the principle clear. He told me that in his master thesis, he needed to work for a company and present some findings about some kind of scientific question, which I'm not going to give in detail. First of all, because I didn't understand the details. I only know the rough outline of the scientific experiment he was working on. And second of all, of course, I want to protect him in this case, all right? And what he told me was kind of interesting. He was a basically straight A student in chemistry. He wrote straight A's. He didn't have any problems with exams. Even his experiments, his like 12 hours chemistry lab sessions went pretty well. So he basically graduated with a master degree with a grade of A minus or something like that on average, which is completely brutal. And so what he told me that he actually cheated on his master's thesis. So he basically scientifically manipulated some findings with the actual question being posed is not really that important, so it won't be that huge of a consequence. So ethically speaking, he didn't do that much wrong, right? But the reason for that, why he cheated, is the amount of randomness. So everything seemed to be logically in place to come to a certain conclusion that he has set up, to a certain hypothesis he has set up. But for whatever reason, nothing made sense, as the experiments always turned out to get a random effect or some false effect. And he couldn't explain why. And he was working on this experiment for like, I don't know, months. Like basically some kind of reaction he was working on. And he couldn't explain it why. And this is the principle of randomness, when just randomness fucks up your whole study. This is a big thing in nutrition science, this is a big thing in psychology, this is a really big thing in medicine. So the amount of factors, of uncalculable factors, basically build upon the frustration because something is not working as intended, even though every bit of theory you know should lead to the reality coming to that conclusion. And so this frustration builds the motivation to cheat and to falsify findings, which can lead to a pattern of behavior. Of course, my friend, he is not continuing to do any kind of further scientific work. He just wanted to get his master's degree and get to working. But there are other cases, of course. For example, like, let's say psychologists, let's say medical doctors, medical researchers, etc., which want to get the professor's title or the PhD because of different reasons. For example, in the medical field, it's common to get this kind of degree because it's a status symbol. So basically, being a professor in the medical field is kind of like a status symbol, right? And so if you like falsify findings, get away with it, you have a tendency to do it again and to basically cheat your way up the academic ladder. Another thing that adds up to that is the brutally low pay for scientific research. You basically, if you do scientific research, you're just barely able to feed yourself. The other thing is economic corruption. So basically, academic corruption through economy. You heard it a lot. The big corporations financing certain academic institutions or financing researchers to have certain conclusions published by them. So basically, big food companies financing nutrition scientists and medical scientists to push a certain to come to the conclusion that the effects of a certain food additive are benign. Also, pharmaceutical companies financing researchers to say that the side effects of a certain new drug that the FDA wants to approve are benign, so that the FDA approves it, or the public believes it, because the FDA may or may not be in this themselves. But all of these factors, they lead to a certain corruption of mind, right? And so this leads to a sort of chain reaction where first of all normal where a normal person at first can have their mind corrupted and their personality shifted in a sort of gradual, subtle way. And of course, this frustration that builds up over time also manifests in a sort of anger, which also describes the toxicity of many of the academic professors. Now, while there are these disciplines which are quite high in randomness, like medicine, psychology, etc., biology, there are disciplines that are actually not high in randomness at all, like mathematics. Like, in a sort of sense, mathematics has a lot of randomness, but what I mean is, if you take a mathematical professor, he worked hard for that shit because he had to. He had no other option to cheat most of the time. Of course, there are exceptions in any case, but in mathematics, if you try to cheat your way around something, you'll immediately get called out for it. If you build something that resembles a proof but is not really a proof, any kind of mathematician can immediately come in and call out your bullshit. This happened to me, for example, a lot of times. Not because I actually wanted to cheat, but because I'm actually not good at mathematics. So I was having this mental bias of trying to get a certain point of proving something and basically falsifying my own results because of being mentally biased. So being biased is of course also a factor. But usually there is also not a really economic motivation to finance studies when it comes to mathematics, simply because mathematics is that important. If any kind of mathematics report would be falsified in theory, it does only have negative effects. It cannot have positive effects because mathematics essentially describes the whole world. And so The other thing that comes to like studying mathematics, for example, is the motivation why many people study mathematics. And the core motivation, in contrast to popular fields, popular difficult fields like medical fields, is the lack of status motivated people who want to study mathematics for status, because what kind of big status does mathematicians have unless you're the next Euler or Gauss? But if you're the next Euler or Gauss, you definitely didn't do it to become the next Euler or Gauss. You get what I mean? So it's like the people who study mathematics mostly study mathematics because of either money, because being a mathematician brings you quite a good paycheck at the end of the day if you're working in a insurance company or something like that. But most of the time, especially the higher you go to the hierarchy, because those who work at insurance, for example, or any other kind of institution where they make a lot of money, they just grind through their bachelor without trying hard not to kill themselves and go in the economy and earn money for the rest of their life. On the other hand, those researchers who get to the top, the PhD, the professors of mathematics, they do it because they live for that shit, right? They do it because they are fascinated of that shit. There is not like a big status thing going on there because it's simply too hard. It's simply too logical of a language, of a construct, that you would ever be as insane as to become a professor of mathematics for this status. Of course, with everything there are certain exceptions, but most of the time they do it because of the love of the game. And so, therefore, based on all these hypotheses of mine, I would say, or based on all these thinking constructs of mine, I would say in such fields such as mathematics, the more logical and abstract you go, and the further away from randomness you go, the less you have cheating, mistreating people like your workers, the less you have any other kind of corruption in the academic field you're working on. So if you ever want to consider like being a researcher for something, keep these negative side effects in mind. And maybe this will influence your choice in what to study or what to do research in. But thank you for watching.